The ice under my deck was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever been fined for, and I'd lived in this subdivision in Naperville, Illinois, for 3 years, dealing with increasingly absurd HOA complaints. But this morning, standing in my driveway with a certified letter in my hand, and a middle-aged woman named Patricia Carmichael pointing at my backyard like I'd committed a war crime, I realized we'd reached a new level of insanity. "Mr. Young," Patricia said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "The HOA clearly states in Section 17, subsection D, that all homeowners must maintain their property to prevent unsightly conditions. That ice formation under your deck is a direct violation." I looked at her, then at the letter, then back at her perfectly coiffed blonde hair that hadn't moved an inch despite the February wind. "Patricia, it's winter in Illinois. Ice forms. That's what water does when it's cold. The bylaws don't care about meteorology, Mr. Young. You have 7 days to correct this violation or face a $500 fine, followed by additional fines of $100 per day, until compliance is achieved." I stood there in my work clothes, having just gotten home from my job as a software engineer at a downtown firm, and tried to process what was happening. My deck was a standard wooden structure, maybe 15 feet off the ground because my backyard sloped down toward a small retention pond. During winter, snow would fall through the gaps between the deck boards, and when temperatures fluctuated, some of it would melt and refreeze, creating icicles and ice formations underneath. It was completely natural and happened to literally every elevated deck in any cold climate. "This is insane," I said. "What do you expect me to do about weather?" Patricia's eyes narrowed. "That's your problem to solve, Mr. Young. Good day." She walked back to her pearl-white Lexus, and I watched her drive away, her HOA board member placard prominently displayed on her dashboard like it was a badge of honor. I'd moved to this neighborhood because it seemed nice. Tree-lined streets, good schools nearby even though I didn't have kids yet, reasonable commute to Chicago. The HOA seemed harmless at first. Mow your lawn, don't paint your house purple, normal stuff. Then Patricia Carmichael got elected to the board 2 years ago. Since then, I'd been fined for having my garbage cans visible from the street for more than 12 hours on trash day. I'd been fined for having a holiday wreath up 4 days past New Year's. I'd been fined for parking my car on the street overnight when my garage door opener broke, and I couldn't get a replacement until the next day. Each fine came with Patricia personally delivering the notice, always with that same self-satisfied expression. But this was different. This wasn't about me being lazy or forgetful. This was about literal weather. I walked around to my backyard and looked under the deck. Sure enough, there were some icicles hanging from the support beams and a thin sheet of ice on the ground underneath where dripping water had frozen. It looked like every other deck in every other cold state in America during winter. Nothing was damaged. Nothing was unsafe. It was just ice. I pulled out my phone and called my best friend Marcus, who lived 2 subdivisions over. "They fine you for what?" Marcus laughed when I explained. "Ice. Under my deck. I'm not making this up. Man, that's Patricia for you. Remember when she tried to fine the Johnsons for having the wrong shade of beige on their shutters? Yeah, but they fought it and won. After spending $3 grand on a lawyer," Marcus reminded me. "Look, you could probably beat this too, but is it worth it?" I looked at the letter again. "I don't want to pay them a dime for this. It's the principle." "So what are you going to do?" That's when the idea hit me. If Patricia wanted the ice gone, I'd make sure there would never be ice under my deck again. Ever. Over the next few days, I did my research. I talked to contractors, looked up building codes and priced out materials. The solution was actually pretty straightforward. I could enclose the area under the deck, essentially creating a sealed space, and install heating elements to keep it above freezing. It would be expensive, but it would work. My girlfriend, Felicity Whitmore, thought I was crazy when I explained it to her that weekend. "Ethan, that's going to cost thousands of dollars," she said, sitting at my kitchen table with her laptop open. Felicity worked in marketing and had a practical approach to most things. "Just pay the fine and move on." "It's not about the money," I said. "Well, it is, but it's more than that. If I pay this fine, what's next? Are they going to fine me for rain being too wet? For snow being too white?" Felicity closed her laptop and looked at me with those green eyes that usually convinced me to be reasonable. "Babe, I get it. Patricia is awful, but sometimes you have to pick your battles." "This is my battle," I said. "I'm doing this." She sighed but smiled. "Okay, crazy man, what do you need? Help designing it so it doesn't look terrible. You're the creative one." We spent the rest of the weekend planning. The space under my deck was roughly 30 feet by 15 feet. I'd need to install lattice panels that could be properly sealed, insulation, and electric radiant heating strips. The whole thing would need to look intentional, not like some ramshackle addition. If I was going to do this, I'd do it right. Monday morning, I took a personal day and drove to the HOA management office. I wanted to submit my construction plans and get approval before starting. Even in my state of frustration, I knew I had to follow procedures. The office was in a strip mall, wedged between a dental practice and a tax preparation service. Inside, a tired-looking woman named Gloria sat behind a desk covered in folders. "I need to submit a construction modification request," I said, handing her my carefully prepared documentation. Gloria looked through it, her reading glasses sliding down her nose. "You want to enclose and heat the space under your deck?" "Yes, to prevent ice formation." She looked up at me and I saw the hint of a smile. "Let me guess, Patricia." "Patricia." Gloria stamped my application. "You'll need board approval. Next meeting is Thursday night at 7. You should come present your case." "Will do, thanks." "Off the record," Gloria leaned forward. "Good for you. That woman has made my job a living nightmare for 2 years." I left feeling slightly vindicated. At least someone understood. Thursday night came, and I dressed in business casual, printed out my plans, and drove to the community center for the HOA board meeting. The room was set up with a long table at the front where 5 board members sat. Patricia was right in the middle, looking like she was about to rule on a Supreme Court case. The other board members were Carl Morrison, a retired accountant who usually looked half asleep; Linda Chen, who owned a local bakery and seemed reasonable; Robert Daniels, who worked in insurance and always voted with Patricia; and Susan Martinez, a nurse who I'd never actually heard speak at these meetings. About 20 other homeowners were scattered in the audience chairs, probably there for their own issues. Patricia called the meeting to order, and they went through several items. Someone wanted to install a fence. Approved. Someone else wanted to replace their driveway. Approved with conditions. Then they got to me. "Ethan Young, property address 4782 Maple Ridge Drive," Patricia read. "Request to enclose and heat the space beneath his elevated deck." I walked to the front with my documents. "Yes, thank you. As you can see in my plans, I'm proposing to install sealed lattice panels around the perimeter of the space under my deck, add insulation, and install electric heating elements. This will maintain a temperature above freezing and prevent ice formation, which I understand is a concern for the HOA. Patricia's face was unreadable. "Why would you need to do this?" "Because I received a violation notice about ice under my deck. This will permanently solve that issue." Carl Morrison spoke up, sounding surprised. "You got a violation for ice. Like from winter." "Yes, sir." Linda Chen flipped through some papers. "I don't remember voting on that violation. Because it was within my authority as HOA president to issue it directly for clear bylaw violations," Patricia said quickly. "The request before us is for the construction modification." "Which section of the bylaws covers ice under decks?" Linda asked, her tone suggesting she already knew the answer. "Section 17, subsection D, unsightly conditions." "That's a bit of a stretch, Patricia," Susan Martinez said. It was the first time I'd heard her voice. "But regardless, Mr. Young's solution is actually quite elegant. The plans look professional. I move to approve." "Second," Linda said immediately. Patricia looked like she'd swallowed something bitter. "Discussion." "I think it's ridiculous," Robert Daniels said, right on cue. "If we approve this, what's next? Are people going to want to enclose their entire yards?" "It's under his deck," Carl said, now fully awake. "How is that even remotely the same thing?" The debate went on for 15 minutes. I stood there answering questions about contractors, timelines, and materials. Finally, they called for a vote. All in favor of approving Ethan Young's construction modification. Linda, Susan, and Carl raised their hands. Opposed, Patricia and Robert. Motion carries 3-2. Approved. I thanked them and returned to my seat, trying not to smile too broadly. Patricia looked furious, but there was nothing she could do about it. The next morning, I called Dave Chen, a contractor who'd been recommended by his sister Linda from the HOA board. He came out that afternoon to look at the project. "Your girlfriend has good taste," Dave said, reviewing Felicity's design sketches. "This will actually look really nice, better than just an open space underneath." "How long will it take?" "If the weather cooperates, maybe 2 weeks. We need to set the panels, seal everything, run the electrical, install the heating elements, and make sure it all meets code. You'll need an electrical inspection too." "Cost? Ballpark? 8 grand, maybe 9. I winced but nodded. "Let's do it." Dave started work that Monday. The first few days were just preparation, setting up work areas and taking precise measurements. Then they began installing the vertical posts and framework for the lattice panels. Felicity had chosen a nice decorative pattern that looked intentional and architectural rather than like we were just walling something off. Patricia drove by at least 3 times a day. I could see her slowing down, staring at the work in progress. On Wednesday, she actually parked and got out. "Mr. Young," she called out. I was working from home that day and came outside. "Yes, Patricia. I want to ensure all proper permits have been filed." "They have. You can check with the village if you'd like. Everything's above board." "The noise from the construction is disruptive to the neighborhood. It's 2 in the afternoon on a Wednesday, well within allowed construction hours." She pursed her lips and walked back to her car without another word. Dave emerged from under the deck, wiping his hands. "She always like that." "Pretty much. How's it going?" "Good. We're ahead of schedule actually. Should have the panels up by Friday, then we can start on the heating system." By Friday evening, the lattice panels were installed, and I had to admit, it looked fantastic. The white vinyl lattice complemented my house perfectly, and Felicity had been right about adding decorative trim at the top. It looked like it had always been meant to be there. Saturday, the electrician came. His name was Tom, and he was a chatty guy who'd apparently worked on dozens of homes in the subdivision. "Heard about your ice violation," Tom said, running wire under the deck. "That's the craziest thing Patricia's come up with yet. You know her?" "Oh yeah. She tried to get me fined once for having my work van parked in my driveway. Said it was a commercial vehicle and violated the bylaws. Had to point out that the bylaws only restricted vehicles over a certain weight and my van was well under it. Did she back off? Eventually. But she made my life miserable for a month first. Where do you want the thermostat control? I showed him where I wanted it mounted inside my house, near the back door. He installed a programmable system that would kick on whenever the temperature dropped below 40 degrees. This is actually a pretty sweet setup, Tom said, finishing up. You could use this space for storage now. Maybe screen it in during summer, make it a cool hangout spot. I hadn't thought of that. The area was going to be completely sealed and climate-controlled. There were definitely possibilities. By the following Wednesday, 2 days before my violation deadline, the project was complete. The space under my deck was fully enclosed with attractive lattice panels, properly insulated, and heated by electric radiant strips that would keep it above freezing indefinitely. Dave's crew had even installed some LED strip lighting so the space glowed softly at night, making it a deliberate design feature. I had the village inspector come out on Thursday morning. He spent an hour checking everything: the structural integrity, the electrical work, the ventilation system we'd included to prevent moisture buildup. All looks good, he said, signing off on the permit. This is some quality work. That afternoon, I sent copies of the final inspection report, photos of the completed work, and a formal letter to the HOA office. The letter politely informed them that the violation they'd cited had been permanently corrected, and that no ice would form under my deck going forward. I copied Patricia directly. Friday morning, my deadline day, Patricia showed up at my door at 8 a.m. I was still in my pajamas, coffee in hand. "Mr. Young, I need to inspect your deck correction. Be my guest." I followed her around to the backyard, sipping my coffee. She walked around the perimeter trying to find something wrong. The lattice was perfect. The seals were tight. She couldn't see inside, but I could show her the inspection report that confirmed everything was to code. "This is excessive," she finally said. "It solves the problem." This must have cost a fortune. My finances aren't HOA business. I'll need to verify that all permits were properly filed. Already sent you the inspection report. Everything's documented. Patricia stood there, clearly frustrated that she couldn't find a single thing wrong. The HOA reserves the right to inspect the interior of the enclosed space. The HOA approved the construction modification. The village inspected and approved it. It's a sealed utility space now, no different than my garage or shed. We'll see about that. She stormed off. Felicity came over that night with wine and takeout to celebrate. We sat on my newly heated and enclosed lower level, which was indeed quite comfortable even though it was 20 degrees outside. "I still think you're crazy," Felicity said, "but I have to admit, this turned out amazing." "Have you thought about what you'll actually use this space for? Storage, maybe? Or I could set up a workshop. The heating means I can use it year-round. You could rent it out as the world's weirdest studio apartment." We both laughed at that. But sitting there in my spite-motivated construction project, I felt pretty good about things. I'd stood up to Patricia's ridiculous overreach, followed all the rules, and ended up with something that actually added value to my property. That satisfaction lasted until Monday morning when I found another certified letter in my mailbox. This one claimed that my new deck enclosure violated different bylaws. It was too white and created a visual disturbance. It altered the profile of my home without Architectural Review Committee approval. The lattice pattern wasn't on the approved materials list. Each violation carried a $300 fine. I called Gloria at the HOA office immediately. "Gloria, this is Ethan Young. I just got another violation notice. Patricia is claiming my deck enclosure, which the board literally approved 2 weeks ago, now violates different bylaws." Gloria sighed heavily. "Let me pull your file. Hold on, I heard papers rustling. Okay, yeah, I'm looking at this. She filed these this morning. Mr. Young, between you and me, this is ridiculous. The board approved your construction. You got permits and passed inspection. So what do I do? You can request an expedited board hearing to appeal the violations. I'll put you on the agenda for Thursday's emergency session. There's an emergency session. There is now. I'll make sure of it. Thursday evening, I was back in the community center, but this time I'd brought reinforcements. Felicity came with me, and so did Marcus. I'd also printed out extensive documentation, including the original approval, all permits, inspection reports, and photos showing that my lattice was identical in color and style to lattice on at least 6 other properties in the subdivision. The board looked tired. This was their second meeting in 2 weeks, and I got the impression they weren't happy about it. Patricia opened with her case. The violations speak for themselves. Mr. Young's construction, while technically approved, violates our aesthetic guidelines. The color is too bright, the pattern is too ornate, and the overall effect is— Patricia, Linda Chen interrupted. I'm looking at the photos he submitted. That's the exact same lattice that's on my brother's deck. The one you personally told him looked lovely. That's different. How? The context is different. Carl Morrison leaned forward. Patricia, why are we here? We approved this construction. He followed every rule. He got permits. He passed inspection. What's the actual problem? The problem is that Mr. Young is thumbing his nose at HOA authority. No, I said firmly. The problem is that you issued a violation for weather. I solved it in a way that follows every single rule, improves my property, and actually looks good. Now you're inventing new violations because you're mad that I didn't just pay your fine. How dare you? Let him finish, Susan Martinez said. I pulled out my documents. I have here photos of 7 other properties in this subdivision with white lattice. 3 of them have the exact same pattern as mine. None of them have been cited for violations. I have the board meeting minutes showing my construction was approved. I have every permit and inspection report. There is no legitimate violation here. Robert Daniels spoke up. Even if there were aesthetic concerns, which I'm not sure I agree with, the time to raise them was before approval, not after construction is complete. I move to dismiss all violations related to Mr. Young's deck enclosure, Linda said. Second, Carl added. This is premature, Patricia protested. We need a full architectural review. We already approved it, Susan said. Linda's right. All in favor of dismissing the violations. 4 hands went up. Only Patricia abstained. Motion carries. Violations dismissed. I thanked the board and left with Felicity and Marcus. In the parking lot, Marcus clapped me on the shoulder. Man, you actually did it. You beat Patricia Carmichael. I just followed the rules, I said. That's all I ever did. But as we drove away, I saw Patricia in her Lexus, and the look on her face told me this wasn't over. I was right. Over the next month, I received 3 more violation notices. My mailbox was 2 inches too far from the curb. My doormat was burgundy when only earth tones were permitted. My outdoor thermometer mounted by my front door constituted an unauthorized architectural modification. Each one was more ridiculous than the last, and each one I fought. Gloria started preemptively scheduling board meetings because she knew they'd vote down Patricia's violations. The other board members were clearly getting fed up. At the March meeting, after dismissing Patricia's claim that my porch light was too bright, Linda Chen made an announcement. I'm calling for a vote of no confidence in Patricia Carmichael's role as HOA president. Her abuse of the violation system is wasting everyone's time and money. Second, Susan said immediately. Patricia's face went red. "You can't do this. I was elected." "And we can remove you for cause," Carl said, pulling out a copy of the bylaws. "Right here. Board members can be removed by a majority vote for actions detrimental to the association." The vote was 4-1, with only Robert Daniels voting to keep Patricia. She was immediately removed as president, though she remained on the board as a regular member. Linda was elected as the new president, and one of her first acts was issuing a formal apology to me for the harassment I'd endured. She also implemented new rules requiring all violation notices to be reviewed and approved by at least 2 board members before being issued. I thought that would be the end of it, but Patricia wasn't done. In April, I came home from work to find a notice taped to my door. It wasn't from the HOA. It was from the Village of Naperville Code Enforcement. Someone had filed a complaint claiming my deck enclosure was structurally unsafe and had been built without proper permits. Both claims were false and easily disproved, but it still meant dealing with another inspector, more documentation, and wasted time. The inspector was apologetic when he came out. "Yeah, we have to follow up on all complaints, even the obviously bogus ones. Everything's clearly in order here. Nice work, actually. Sorry for the hassle. Can I ask who filed the complaint?" Anonymous, but it came through a HOA member portal. He gave me a knowing look. I filed a formal complaint with the HOA board about Patricia's continued harassment. Linda took it seriously and called a special session. At that meeting, with a dozen homeowners in attendance, Linda addressed Patricia directly. "Patricia, we have evidence that you've been filing false reports with Village Code Enforcement, wasting municipal resources and continuing to harass Mr. Young. This needs to stop. I have every right to report concerns about property safety." The inspector found nothing wrong. "You knew there was nothing wrong. You're abusing the system. I'm protecting property values." "You're on a vendetta," Carl said flatly. "And frankly, I'm tired of it. I move to remove Patricia from the board entirely." This time, even Robert Daniels voted yes. Patricia was off the board, out of power, just another homeowner in the subdivision. I hoped that would truly be the end of it. For a while, it was quiet. Spring turned to summer. My heated deck enclosure worked perfectly, and I'd actually started using the space as a workshop. I set up a workbench, some tools, and it became my favorite spot to put her around on weekends. Felicity and I got more serious. She started staying over most weekends, and we talked about her maybe moving in. Life was good. Then in July, things got weird. I started noticing that items in my backyard were moved. A lawn chair that I'd left by the deck was suddenly on the other side of the yard. My grill had been rolled several feet from where I'd parked it. Small things, easy to dismiss as memory errors, except they kept happening. Then I found footprints in the mulch around my deck enclosure. They were small, probably from women's shoes, and they circled the entire structure. Someone had been in my yard, examining my deck. I installed security cameras the next weekend. 4 of them, covering every angle of my backyard and the sides of my house. 2 days later, the cameras caught Patricia Carmichael climbing over my back fence at 2 in the morning. The footage was clear. She was dressed in dark clothes, carrying a flashlight, and she spent 20 minutes inspecting my deck enclosure, trying the lattice panels to see if they'd open and taking photos. Then she climbed back over the fence and left. I called the police immediately. The officer who responded was a middle-aged guy named Sergeant Mike Reynolds. He watched the footage and nodded slowly. "That's trespassing, clear as day. You want to press charges?" "Absolutely." "Any idea why she's doing this?" I explained the entire saga. The ice violation, the construction, the harassment, her removal from the HOA board. Sergeant Reynolds took notes and shook his head. HOA disputes are usually civil matters, but once someone starts trespassing and stalking, that's criminal. I'll have a chat with Miss Carmichael and see if she wants to explain herself. He came back the next day with an update. So, Miss Carmichael claims she was checking for structural issues that might affect neighboring properties. Says as a concerned community member, she has a right to ensure safety standards. At 2 in the morning. By trespassing, that's what I told her. I made it clear that she's to stay off your property. If she comes back, she'll be arrested. I'd recommend getting a formal restraining order if this continues. It continued. 3 nights later, Patricia was back. This time she brought tools. The cameras caught her trying to pry open one of the lattice panels. When that didn't work, she started taking measurements and more photos. I called the police again. This time they sent officers immediately. They caught Patricia still in my yard. She was arrested for criminal trespassing and attempted vandalism. The attempted vandalism charge came from the damage she'd done trying to pry the lattice panel open. Felicity was with me when it happened. We watched from the window as officers put Patricia in handcuffs and walked her to their squad car. She was yelling something about HOA authority and property rights the entire time. "This is insane," Felicity said. "She's really lost it." "I just wanted to live in my house and not be fined for weather," I said. The next morning, I went to the courthouse and filed for a restraining order. The hearing was set for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, Patricia was released on bail with an order to stay away from my property. She violated it almost immediately. 4 days after her arrest, I came home from work to find her standing in my driveway, taking photos of my house with a professional-looking camera. I didn't even get out of my car. I just called 911. The police arrived within 5 minutes. Patricia tried to argue that she was on the street, not my property, but my driveway is private property. She was arrested again, this time for violating a court order. This time, she didn't get bail. The restraining order hearing became a criminal proceedings hearing. Felicity came with me for support, and so did Linda Chen and several other neighbors who'd apparently also had problems with Patricia. The courtroom was surprisingly full. Apparently, word had spread about the crazy HOA president who couldn't let go. The prosecutor laid out the case. The original harassment through HOA violations, the trespassing caught on camera, the attempted vandalism, and the violation of court orders. They played my security footage, which was damning. Patricia's lawyer tried to argue that she'd had legitimate concerns about structural safety affecting the neighborhood. But the prosecutor pointed out that she'd been removed from the HOA board, had no official capacity to inspect anything, and had repeatedly been told to stay away. The judge was a stern woman named Judge Ellen Morrison, who'd clearly seen too many ridiculous cases in her career. "Miss Carmichael, I'm looking at a pattern of obsessive behavior here. You've been removed from your HOA position. You've been asked repeatedly to leave Mr. Young alone. You've been arrested twice. What part of stay away is unclear to you?" Patricia stood up despite her lawyer's attempt to stop her. "Your Honor, you don't understand. He violated the spirit of the HOA covenants." Yes, he technically followed the rules, but what he did was designed to mock the association. Someone needs to maintain standards. That's not your job anymore, and even when it was, you overstepped your authority repeatedly. Sit down. Patricia sat, but she looked mutinous. Judge Morrison issued a permanent restraining order requiring Patricia to stay at least 500 feet from me, my property, and my place of work. She was also convicted of criminal trespassing and violating a court order, sentenced to 6 months of probation, ordered to pay restitution for the damage to my lattice panel, and required to complete anger management counseling. If you violate this order again, Miss Carmichael, you will go to jail. Am I clear? Yes, Your Honor. As we left the courthouse, Linda Chen caught up with me. Ethan, on behalf of the HOA board, I want to apologize for everything you've been through. We're implementing new oversight procedures to prevent anything like this from happening again. Thanks, Linda. I appreciate that. Also, we're going to remove Patricia from the board entirely and ban her from holding any HOA position in the future. The vote was unanimous. That evening, Felicity and I sat on my back deck, the regular upper level, with beers and watched the sunset. Below us, my heated and enclosed lower level glowed softly from the LED lights. So was it worth it? Felicity asked. 8 grand, months of harassment, criminal charges. I thought about it. Honestly, yeah, because it wasn't really about the deck or the ice or the money. It was about not letting someone abuse their tiny bit of power to make people miserable. Patricia thought she could bully me into compliance with an unjust fine. Instead, I followed every rule, did everything right, and when she couldn't accept that, she went off the rails and exposed herself for what she really was. A control freak with boundary issues. Exactly. And now she can't hurt anyone else in the neighborhood. Felicity clinked her beer against mine. Well, here's to your heated deck and expensive principles. I'll drink to that. Life returned to normal after that. Patricia stayed away, probably because she didn't want to go to jail. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she'd moved away a few months later, selling her house and relocating to Arizona. Apparently, her husband had had enough of the drama. The HOA, under Linda's leadership, became much more reasonable. They focused on actual issues like maintaining common areas and organizing neighborhood events, not harassing people over trivial violations. Several of the more ridiculous bylaws were amended or removed entirely. Felicity moved in with me that fall. The first thing she did was help me set up the enclosed deck space as a proper workshop and storage area. We installed shelves, organized my tools, and even set up a small seating area. It became the most useful space in the house. The following winter, when snow fell and temperatures dropped, I'd occasionally go down there just to appreciate the fact that there was no ice forming anywhere. My heating system worked flawlessly, keeping the space at a comfortable 55 degrees while outside it was 15 below. Marcus came over one particularly cold January evening, and I showed him the space. "Man, you really did it," he said. "You spent 8 grand to spite the HOA, and you ended up with something actually useful. Best 8 grand I ever spent. Think Patricia ever thinks about you?" "Probably every day," I said, "but that's her problem now." We went back upstairs where Felicity was making dinner. The 3 of us ate together, laughing about old stories and making plans for the summer. Life was good. The HOA left me alone. My property was well maintained. And under my deck, where ice used to form and cost me hundreds of dollars in fines, there was now a heated, sealed, useful space that I used constantly. Sometimes I'd run into neighbors who'd heard the story. They'd ask to see the famous deck, and I'd show them. Most found it hilarious that I'd gone to such lengths. A few asked for Dave Chen's contact information because they wanted similar work done. The real victory, though, came about a year after Patricia's conviction. I was checking my mail one afternoon when a moving truck pulled up to her old house. A young couple got out, looking excited about their new home. I walked over to introduce myself. "Hi, I'm Ethan Young, live 2 houses down. Welcome to the neighborhood." "Thanks, I'm David, and this is my wife, Amy. We're excited to be here. It's a great subdivision. HOA is pretty reasonable, good neighbors, quiet street." That's what we heard. Actually, our realtor told us some story about the previous owner having issues with the HOA, said it all got resolved though. Yeah, there was some drama a while back. Nothing to worry about now. New board leadership. Everything's much better. We chatted for a few more minutes, and I helped them figure out which garage door opener was which. Normal neighbor stuff. As I walked back to my house, I realized that Patricia's legacy in the subdivision was now just a cautionary tale that realtors told new buyers. All her power, all her authority, all her crusading to maintain standards, it had come down to being the example of what not to do. And my legacy was having a really nice heated workshop under my deck. I'd take that trade any day. Felicity and I got engaged that spring. We decided to have the engagement party at our house, and we used both levels of the deck for seating and food. The enclosed lower level was perfect for keeping drinks cold and storing supplies, and several guests commented on how clever the setup was. Linda Chen came to the party with her brother Dave and his family. Over by the grill, Linda pulled me aside. "You know, Ethan, in a weird way, what happened with you and Patricia was the best thing for this HOA. It forced us to really examine our policies and how we were treating residents. We've had fewer complaints, better attendance at meetings, and more community involvement since we restructured. Glad some good came out of it. More than some. You stood up to a bully and you did it the right way, following the rules, documenting everything, not backing down. You taught the whole neighborhood that HOA boards aren't dictatorships. We work for the homeowners, not the other way around." That conversation stuck with me. I hadn't set out to reform the HOA or make some grand statement about governance. I just wanted to live in my house without being fined for things outside my control. But by standing firm and refusing to accept unjust treatment, I'd accidentally sparked real change. The ice under my deck had been Patricia's attempt to flex her authority over something meaningless. My response, which probably seemed excessive at the time, had been about establishing a boundary. "You can't fine me for weather. You can't make up violations because you don't like me. You have to follow your own rules." And when she couldn't accept those boundaries, Patricia had escalated until she'd broken actual laws. That was on her, not me. I just refused to be a victim of petty tyranny. As I stood on my deck that evening, surrounded by friends and neighbors, watching Felicity laugh at one of Marcus's terrible jokes, I felt genuinely content. My house was mine. My deck was heated and ice-free. My HOA was reasonable, and the person who tried to make my life miserable was gone. Sometimes standing up for yourself is expensive. Sometimes it's time-consuming and frustrating, but sometimes it's absolutely worth it. I never did get another violation notice. Not for ice, not for mailbox placement, not for anything. The HOA board operated fairly and reasonably, focusing on genuine community issues rather than manufactured problems. Property values in the subdivision actually increased, probably because people weren't afraid of living under a microscope anymore. Years later, I'd occasionally tell the story to friends who didn't know the background. Their reactions ranged from disbelief to admiration to laughter. Most people couldn't imagine spending $8,000 to solve a $500 fine, but it was never about the money. It was about the principle. It was about not letting someone abuse their position to harass people. It was about standing up to bullying, even when the bully had official authority, and practically speaking, I got a great workshop out of it. Climate-controlled, properly lit, organized, and useful year-round. I built furniture in there. I did home repairs. I stored holiday decorations and outdoor equipment. It was genuinely one of the best features of my house. So yeah, Patricia Carmichael tried to fine me for ice forming under my deck. I sealed the deck and heated it. And in doing so, I got rid of a wannabe tyrant, improved my property, and helped reform an HOA. Not bad for a software engineer who just wanted to live in peace. The moral of the story, if there is one, is this: sometimes the crazy response is the right response. Sometimes you have to go big, follow every rule to the letter, and call people's bluffs. Patricia thought she could exhaust me into compliance. She thought I'd just pay the fine and accept her authority. She was wrong, and now somewhere in Arizona, she's probably still bitter about it. Meanwhile, I'm sitting in my house in Naperville with my beautiful fiancée, my heated deck, and my reasonable HOA, living my best life. The ice under my deck never formed again. The problem was solved, permanently and completely. And every winter, when the temperature drops and snow falls, I smile knowing that under my deck it's a comfortable 55 degrees. Patricia wanted me to prevent ice formation. Mission accomplished, just not the way she'd expected.